Here we will see exception handling in Python. An object in Python that describes an error is called an exception. While execution of a code, when a condition occurs that a code can't handle it at the time of execution of a program, it raises an exception. The cause of an exception is often external to the program itself. For example, an incorrect input. Since the program unexpectedly terminates on encountering an exception, it may cause damage to a system resources, such as files. Hence, the exception should be properly handled so that an unexpected termination of the program is prevented. Some of the reasons for using exception handling in Python are: exception handling allows user to separate error handling code from normal code. With code comments, exception helps user to remind him about program expectations. It clarifies the code and enhances the readability. It allows user to stimulate consequences as the error handling takes place at one place and in one manner. An exception is a convenient method for handling error messages. Raising an exception helps user to break the current code execution and returns back to the code until it is handled. Exceptions allows programmer to jump an exception handler in a single step, which will break all the function calls. Exceptions can be an optimized quality of goto statement in which the program error that occurs at runtime gets easily managed by the exception block. When the interpreter encounters an error, it allows the execution to go to the exception part to solve and continue the execution instead of stopping. While dealing with exceptions, the exception handler creates a mark and executes some code. Within that program, the exception is raised that solves the problem and makes Python jump back to the marked location by not throwing away or skipping any active functions that were called after the marker was left. Different roles of exception handlings are: first is error handling. The exception gets raised whenever the Python detects an error in a program at runtime. Try statement is used to catch and recover the program from exception. Python will jump to the try handler when the program detects an error, and the execution will be resumed. Next is event notification. Exceptions are also used to signal suitable conditions and then passing result flag around the program and text them explicitly. Next is terminate execution. There may arise some problems or errors in the programs that it needs a termination. So try and finally is used that guarantees that closing time operation will be performed. The which statement offers an alternative for objects that support it. And next is exotic flow of control. Programmers can also use exception as a basis for implementing unusual control flow. Since there is no goto statement in Python, so that exceptions can help in this respect. Different exception handling statements in Python are: first is try and except statement. Try clause contains the code that can raise an exception, while the except clause contains the code that handles the exception. Try with else clause. When the try clause fails to throw an exception, the Python interpreter goes to a else block. Finally keyword in Python. It is always used after the try except block. The finally code block is always executed after the try block has terminated. Then raise an exception. If a condition does not meet our criteria but is correct according to the Python interpreter, we can intentionally raise an exception using the raise keyword. Next is assertion. An assertion is a consistency test that we can switch on or off. Assertions are commonly used at the beginning of a function to inspect for valid input and at the end of the calling function to inspect for valid output. And last is user-defined exceptions. These exceptions are defined by inheriting classes from the typical built-in exceptions.